I would like to start the program with, I think that the guest that I would be most proud of introducing today. I've been talking about perception and representation. We've been talking about we can all do it. But we need to bring our youth. We need to bring the young people to know their data, to know their history, so that they can take the power and advance and take no for an answer. So it is my greatest pleasure to introduce you to my own daughter, Tamara Giesiger, who's going to share with us her story.
Hello. Oh, wow. My mom said to stand close, so I hope this is close enough. I moved to the United States 9 years ago without speaking any word of English. Previous to me moving, I had no idea about the term Hispanic. For me, I was just Swiss Mexican. But once I moved, once I learned the term, I had no idea what it meant to be part of the community. So I looked for it, especially now that I'm in high school. But I found nothing. There was not enough representation of teachers, of staff, of students, seeing myself in my classroom, or even in the curriculum. So I started an internship at Hispanic Star to learn more about my community. At school, I became the leader of the Latinx Club and the Diversity, Equity, and Belonging Committee. And last year, I did my history final on the Great Depression, a well-known topic and a topic that I had learned for 3/4 of the year, but I wanted to see how Mexicans were affected during the Great Depression. And what I found was that it was the biggest exodus in American history. And the more I asked around, the more, if I asked if people knew about it, the more no's I got. So I started talking about it more. I started talking about it in family dinners, to the Mexican consul, to the staff of Congressman Ro Khanna, and anyone who was interested, because I ended up learning that understanding our past is practicing and predicting our future. During the Great Depression, the Mexican repatriation, 1 million Mexicans, 60% of whom were born here, therefore had rights as citizens, were exiled. We study as a country the Great Depression at length, and nobody that I asked knew about this. There were dozens of trains, raids, and thousands left to survive on their own back in Mexico. In the details, this is different than the Chinese Exclusion Act, than the Gentleman's Agreement, or the Johnson-Reed Act, because instead of just denying entry, it unfairly deported them. And this was the first presidential edict. So President Hoover was the one who implemented federal and state laws, not only denying Mexicans from being hired, denying them of welfare, but fired everyone in corporate jobs. He implemented roundups and raids, like the La Placita raid in LA, detaining over 400 people in just 1 hour. He implemented media intimidation, where he posted stories of raids in particular Mexican newspapers, making people voluntarily leave out of fear, and compulsion, where he unfairly detained people, giving them a choice to either leave without a trial or fight for their story and have a trial and risk never being able to come back to America. And his plan was called the Plan of Terror. There were monthly trains, and in 1931, in just 1 year in LA, 15 trains left, holding 50 to 75,000 Mexicans. Mexicans initially came to the United States after the Mexican Revolution of 1910 to escape poverty and religious persecution. Almost 10% of Mexico moved from 1880 to 1929 to seek a better life. And the United States, they did just that. They immediately got involved in agriculture, in heavy industry, and in transport. For example, in 1929, 59.5% of Western Railroad workers were Mexican. And in the sugar beet industry in Minnesota, 30% of the workforce were Mexicans. In the Arizona copper mines, 43% of the workforce were Mexicans. They were described by their white workers as loyal, they worked harder, and they did better work, yet they were paid less. And a study found that Mexican railroad workers were paid 25% less than their white counterparts. So during the Great Depression in America, 15 million people lost their jobs, and that accounts for 25% of the workforce. So, normally, programs were implemented to reduce competition, yet the competition was us. The easiest solution was to eliminate the so-called short-term Mexican workforce, who were seen as buffers instead of a core part of the US economy. Mexico also suffered greatly during the Great Depression. And while they were publicly communicating with the US that they wanted their people back, not only was it a lie, but they couldn't afford to. They couldn't afford to have their deportees back in their cities, especially when they were being described as unclothed and sick. So Mexico colonized regions such as Baja California and the Yucatan Peninsula to accommodate people and boom farming. They sent thousands of families there, promising them land and wealth, but the project failed due to dry land, and that led to starvation. Back in the US, in the Bracero program, 4.5 million Mexicans were brought back after the Mexican repatriation under temporary work visas. And in the 50s, Operation Wetback happened, using and implementing military-style tactics to deport and arrest Mexicans, some of them citizens, yet again. In just 1 year, from 1953 to 1954, 1.1 million Mexicans were sent home again. I found out that the biggest deportation is ignored by both the United States and Mexico. It's a source of shame, disgrace, and trauma for a lot of Mexican families. And the most shameful example of the pattern of American history using immigrants as disposable semi-human beings when their job is considered done. I wanted to speak here today, along with my mother, to show you again that learning about our history is predicting our future. And this needs to stop, and we need to learn about our contribution and how important we are. Thank you.